Hello, this is AstrologerCoach Sonja Francis, and today we're going to be talking about the upcoming full moon in 3 degrees of Gemini, which will become exact on November 25th at 5:44 p.m. East Coast time in the US, which is also New York time, or 2:44 p.m. West Coast time in the US, which is also LA time. So a full moon, of course, is always looking for balance within ourselves between two polar opposites. In this case, it's the Gemini and Sagittarian polarity. And full moon is also a relationship-oriented time and an extroverted time. So with these two polarities, what are we dealing with here? So Sagittarius, on the one hand, teaches us a wider perspective and asks us to look beyond just facts and learned knowledge, and wants us to really understand life from our experiences, from how we live life, and the wisdom that we gain from that. Gemini, on the other hand, wants us to stay connected to our immediate environment and our day-to-day mind, and it wants us to process and share information, and to do that possibly as fast and as much as possible. And Gemini also, of course, never wants variety and doesn't like to be bored, right? Now, the Sun in Sagittarius makes an alignment with Saturn and Mercury, also in Sagittarius. So this is really asking us to pay close attention to our thinking and our conditioning, and to really make mature and responsible choices in the here and now. Now, questions that you can ask yourself for the next 2 weeks with this full moon is, what guides choice in your life? And what do I learn about life every day just by living it? And what is the best way to handle foreign affairs? And by foreign affairs, I don't just mean what goes on in other countries, although that's also included. I also mean just certain affairs that are new to you, that are different from your day-to-day experience, that are different from your day-to-day interacting or from your conditioning. Anything that's sort of like goes beyond that. So how do you handle foreign affairs? Now, Neptune has a very, very important placement in this full moon chart. It is currently in Pisces, and it is stationing, which means that the planet is slowly moving, slower moving than it normally would. And that has a strong influence on this lunation, because the energy of Neptune is more exalted. It is stronger than we normally experience it. So that's important. And then it's also part of a T-square. It's squaring the moon in Gemini, the Sun, Saturn, Mercury alignment in Sagittarius. So it's sort of like the focus point of that T-square. And that invites us to like stretch and grow around anything to do with Neptune that has to do with our spiritual connection, creativity, intuition, being in the here and now. And we're also invited to release anything that no longer supports our growth, our growing on a spiritual level, on a physical level, in this world, as a human, as a spirit, both. So, but this also happens, of course, always on an individual level as well as on a collective level. So especially when outer planets are involved, there's always also a collective field that gets created here, where we need to stretch and grow on a collective level as well. Now, this combination also asks us to shift our perspective. It's sort of like a change of mind and heart. You know, it's really kind of like needing to perceive and choose more from the heart, more from our intuitive sensing. And that way we can advance from more fear-based thinking and behaving and coming from, to a more love-based thinking and behaving, and how we interact with ourselves and with others, right? And of course, that in turn also helps us to move from this sense of separateness, that we are separate from everything around us, to a place of integration and oneness, and feeling that interconnectedness that we have with everything around us and everyone around us. Another part of this also is taking responsibility for our own perceptions and attitudes. And that is very important too. And if you want to hear more about that, I want to invite you to watch my video about Saturn in Sagittarius, which will be until 2017, that transit. So feel free to watch that video again, or if you haven't seen it yet, watch it. It's on my YouTube channel to get more of a grip on that. Now, it will be also very helpful with this full moon to focus on our health and our daily routines. And when I say health, I'm talking not necessarily about that there's anything wrong with your health, but there might be something in connection to your well-being, just your day-to-day well-being. You want to focus on that, your daily routines, your work, how you do your daily routines. And living in a physical existence is not always the easiest, of course, as I'm sure most of us have experienced, that it's not always easy to be in a physical body. And but it's also really has its amazing rewards, because we really get to explore and experience things that we might not be able to explore and experience if we weren't in a physical body. So the more we can bring sort of an understanding and sort of like an open-hearted attitude to our daily details in our lives, that the more we can experience the true meaning of unity and compassion and of interconnectedness with the world, with life, with the universe, right? Now, even more than normal, a daily spiritual practice is going to be very helpful at this time with this strong Neptune placement. And I want to talk a little bit about what a spiritual practice is, because I think that a lot of us think of it as, you have to, pray or meditate or, just sit still. But spiritual practices can be many things. Yes, it can be meditation and breathing exercises or yoga or, nature walks, things like that. But it can also be, dancing, singing, music, cooking, cleaning, lying on your bed, putting your feet up, conversing with God, with Source, the universe, your angels, your higher self, spirit guides. It really doesn't matter what you call it. It makes no difference, or how you do it, right? As long as you're tapping into your inner guidance, something inside of you that is sort of like that comes from a deeper place, that's not just your voice of conditioning, to kind of like move away from that conditioned or trained mind to a deeper place that's maybe a little bit more subtle, but that has sort of like, that senses things, that feels things, that knows things. And that's your inner guidance system. Now, since the moon nodes have just switched from Aries Libra to Virgo Pisces last week, and I do have a video on that as well, so feel free to watch that too, to have a little bit more of an understanding of what that's all about. There are a lot of planets and points right now that are in the mutable signs, right? And the mutable signs are Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, and Pisces. And so this is why right now we're going to feel quite restless, and we're going to feel pulled in a lot of different directions. And so it's definitely going to keep us very busy because of all that restlessness and all these different pulls that we have in different directions. And it might also make us feel a little bit ungrounded, maybe overwhelmed. And so one thing that you do want to ask yourself for these next 2 weeks in particular, am I feeling overwhelmed? And if the answer is yes, as best as you can, center yourself in the here and now. Allow yourself to be present. Listen to what's inside of you beyond just the mind chatter or the mind energy. Trust your intuitive self, and just take a moment. Take a moment to be with yourself, right? Follow your inner guidance. This is going to be very, very important for these next 2 weeks. Another thing that is very important, not just for the next 2 weeks, but also, for the next 18 months, because of the moon nodes being in Pisces and Virgo, is really releasing any victim-based thinking. And the best way to notice victim mentality is to catch ourselves when we blame others for things that are happening to us, when we blame life in general, for our current experiences or to what did happen to us before. And if you catch yourself doing this, just acknowledge it in a gentle, compassionate way. Be kind to yourself. We all do this from time to time. It's completely human to do this. There's nothing wrong with it. It just means that it may be something that is part of your conditioning, and it's not necessarily something that serves you to move forward. You may feel stuck because you are, blaming others or life about your current situation, right? Now, the other thing that you also may want to look at is it doesn't mean that you have to blame yourself either for what's been happening in your life or what's currently happening in your life. It is really not required to assign any fault to anybody or anything, or even to yourself. When we do that, when we assign fault, that's when we get stuck. So rather than asking whose fault is it, mine, his, hers, theirs, whatever it might be, acknowledge what is so without judgment. Just see it for what it is. What is your situation? And ask yourself, where do I go from here? What do I want to create? Right? So it's not about fault. It's really about just looking to see what it is and then taking the steps forward that actually support you in being who you are right now, or in creating the things that resonate with who you most want to be, right? Of course, all of this is sometimes easier said than done. It's not always an easy process, right? And a lot of this comes from our conditioning, which is pretty much formed by the age of 7, right? There is this documentary that was out there that says, show me the boy and I show you the man, right? They did a documentary on these kids, growing up, and to see, how that conditioning already forms, and you can already see who these kids are going to be in the future. Now, of course, conditioning doesn't mean that we can't change. It doesn't mean that we are stuck with everything that we were conditioned into until the age of 7. But what is required in order to create that shift is a conscious awareness, of our conditioning, and self-compassion. Because self-compassion is the only way that I personally know of anyways, to create that shift for ourselves. And when we see conditioning for what it is and love ourselves anyways, and then we can really start to make conscious choices in the here and now, and we can make different choices. And everything else that we choose to do, when we have resistance or attachments towards what is or was, or when we want something to be different than it is or than it was. If we're judging something, if we're using force, or if we want to control things, etc., etc., etc. All these things, none of these will really create a lasting shift, right? Even though it may seem so in the moment that we might be able to create a small shift, but it's not going to be a very big one, and it's not going to last. So in my experience, compassion and being aware and just allowing ourselves to be with what is and being compassionate about that is really what can create the shift and can make the difference. So, of course, as best as you can, be kind with yourself with all of this, because yes, it's not always an easy process. Remember that true healing comes from just understanding. It comes from embracing and loving who you are deep down. And, we are spirit beings in human form, and we have to remember that. We have to remember that, to honor the spirit being that we are, but to also honor that we are human. And so one question that you can ask yourself is, what would happen if I embraced my own humanity an extra 5% right now? Just an extra 5%, because sometimes we forget, to do that, and it creates a lot of friction and resistances. Now, I also talk a lot about in my forecast about the power and importance of self-care. And I think this is something that's definitely important here again. There's going to be a lot of nervousness, a lot of nervous energy in the air, a lot of feeling scattered with all these mutable energies. And so as best as you can, take breaks from doing things or just from thinking about things, slow down a little bit, allow yourself to relax, allow your mind to relax. And so for the next 2 weeks, and also, at the time of the full moon, questions that you could ask yourself: am I ready to let go of what I would like to be true? Not what is the truth, but what I would like to be true. And then what might happen if I looked through my fears, concerns, or beliefs that block me from living my own truth? And the last question that you can ask yourself is, what nourishes my soul? And I think these are all great questions. And I also always want to invite you with questions that I ask in my videos to just sit with those questions, rather than answering them right away. Just be with the questions, have them in the back of your mind as you go through your day-to-day life, and allow the answers to just kind of unfold and come to you in different moments. Maybe different answers show up in different moments. And it just kind of like allow the questions to engage sort of like a curious investigation of some sort, or a sort of like a creative process. Allow it to be a creative process, right? Now, if you do have an ascendant or career point or any personal planets in 1 to 8 degrees of Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, or Pisces, then you're definitely going to feel the energies of this full moon more strongly at this time. Even if you don't have planets or points in these signs or degrees, the house placement of the sun and the moon, where they appear in your own personal birth chart, equally as important. If all of this doesn't make any sense to you, feel free to watch my video called How to Read Your Birth Chart. In that video, I describe very beautifully, how to use, the degrees, how to look at the house placements, what it all means. And you can find that video either on my YouTube channel, or you can email us at info@astrologercoach.com and just write recording in the subject line. And then that way my assistant will email you the link to that video and some handouts to that as well. And I want to make one quick announcement here. It's your last chance to take advantage of the deal of the month. The deal of the month ends November 30th. So go to my website at astrologercoach.com and look to see if you would like to take advantage of that. It's definitely a great deal for anybody who wants to deepen their understanding of astrology. Perfect offer for anyone who resonates with that. So feel free to check that out on my website. And if you want to stay in touch with my, daily forecast, my weekly forecast, there's so many ways of being in touch with me all the time, either through my Facebook fan page, my Twitter page. You can also go to my website and check out my weekly forecasts there on my website on the blog page. And if you want the weekly forecasts to come to your email address, to your personal email address, and you want to just have them be sent to you every week, that's possible as well. Then just email us at info@astrologercoach.com and we will send you those weekly forecasts every Sunday evening. Just write weekly forecasts in the subject line. And I also have a newsletter that I send out twice a month. So if you don't want the weekly emails, if that's a little bit too much for you and you just want to be in touch with me and just see what's happening, in terms of my courses or new things that are going on in my business or in my life, and get the videos sent to you, then the newsletter is the best choice for you. And you can just email us then and write newsletter in the subject line. And you can also receive both, of course. So if you want both, weekly forecast and newsletter in the subject line, and it's done. All right, and so we will add you to the appropriate mailing list so that everybody gets what they really want, right? Now, feel free to reach out to me if you have any general questions about this full moon, To Sonja at AstrologerCoach.com. I'd be happy to answer general questions about astrology. If it's anything personal that requires of me to pull up your birth chart, I will ask you to book a reading just to honor my time and to make sure that I can answer your questions fully and completely. All right, I hope this makes sense. Feel free to go to my website if you want to book a reading at AstrologerCoach.com on the services page and see what's available. I have a lot of different choices. And have a fantastic full moon. Remember, it's an extroverted time. It's a relationship-oriented time. It's a time where we're seeking balance. We're really wanting to understand our boundaries and our spiritual connections with life a little bit better at this time. So tap into that. Tap into the inside and use practical application to really, work your spiritual muscles a little bit these next 2 weeks. All right. Have a good one. This is Astrologer Coach Sonja Francis. Goodbye.